Hello, YouTube gamers and RPG enthusiasts. Welcome back to my channel, RPG Retro Reviews, and thank you for watching. In this video, I'm going to count down my personal top 10 retro RPGs of the 1980s. The games discussed here were picked for their contributions to the role-playing hobby, their playability, their contributions to furthering of the role-playing hobby, and the time frame of what would be considered the golden era of RPGs from 1975 to 1990. Alright, let's go ahead and get this countdown started, shall we? Number 10, Champions. Released in 1981, this game was the champion of superhero role-playing games for many years. One of the very first RPGs to eschew dice rolling in favor of a point-buy system for character creation, this innovative game allowed you to create just about any character you could think of, and later evolved into a true universal role-playing game called the Hero System. Its dynamic character creation system made this game extremely popular. However, actual gameplay tended to bog down with wargame-like mechanical precision and mathematical calculations. This is the game that finally allowed me to understand the relationship between decimals and fractions. With a prolific amount of supplements and game modules, this game is easily accessible and a lot of fun. Number 9, Star Frontiers. Released in 1982, Star Frontiers was an outstanding effort by TSR to produce a viable science fiction role-playing game. The mechanics were a simple, straight-up percentile-based system, and thus only used 10-sided dice, with character attributes ranging from 25 to 75. Play takes place in the center of a spiral galaxy where many races have come together to form the United Planetary Federation. Star Frontiers incorporates many elements from popular science fiction franchises such as Star Trek and Star Wars, and adds in its own quirky dynamics. The setting is well developed with unique player character races. Drazilites, humans, Vrusk, Yazarian form the core UPF races, with the mysterious Sathar placed as the primary antagonist. The core mode of play places the player characters as agents of the Pan-Galactic Corporation, fighting off incursions from the Sathar. Travel through space is accomplished via a hyperspace mechanic that greatly reduces travel times. If you enjoy science fiction and are looking for a simple, richly developed campaign setting, you might want to check this game out. There are 2 rule sets. The Alpha Dawn box set lays out the core mechanics and setting, while the Nighthawks box set expands the game to include spaceships and wargame-like mechanics for fighting space battles. Supplements and rules for Star Frontiers are readily available on eBay and at very reasonable prices, making this retro game very easily accessible. Number 8, MechWarrior. The BattleTech universe has a very richly developed campaign setting that covers the history of human expansion into the galaxy well into the 31st century. Originally released by FASA, the game had 3 editions. The 3rd edition of the game was re-released by Fantasy Productions LLC under the classic BattleTech RPG moniker in 2006 to reduce confusion between the role-playing game and WizKid's MechWarrior miniatures game. Given the richness of the BattleTech universe, an RPG is certainly a logical extension of the board game. Here, the players can take on the roles of individual MechWarriors, get involved in the intricate political situations of that universe, and explore a variety of career paths. I played this game quite extensively when it first came out as a member of a mercenary company, and it was a lot of fun. Scenarios can include everything from individual adventures and classic spacefaring forays to actual combat using battle mechs and battle tech mechanics. Role-playing opportunities abound as players can take on the roles from the various houses of the Inner Sphere or one of the mysterious clan races from the Outer Rim. Gritty and realistic, the BattleTech universe offers an almost overwhelming campaign universe from which to draw conflict and rich sci-fi adventure. Number 7. Torg, The Possibility Wars. Over the years, many companies have attempted to create a universal role-playing game. In essence, one game system with many different genres of fiction, such as fantasy, science fiction, pulp adventures, and so on. No one, however, had created a game where you could do all of this at once until 1990, when FASA released Torg, The Possibility Wars. Here, Earth was invaded all at once by a variety of different realms, each headed by a High Lord attempting to capture Earth's possibility energy, and each representing a variety of different realities, from the pulp realm of the Nile Empire to the Dungeons & Dragons style fantasy realm of Isle, the cyberpunk quasi-religious cyberpapsy, to the sci-fi inspired Japanese realm of Nippon Tech. The players took on the roles of Storm Knights, special individuals with the ability to manipulate possibility energy in an attempt to push back the invaders. Torg was a lot of fun in the way it introduced cinematic elements into its game mechanics, with game sessions that were broken down into scenes and acts, to the drama deck that allowed players to influence the plot and gain in-game benefits during Torg play. The Possibility Wars was grand in scope, using a universal D20 style mechanic. Combats tended to play fast and loose. Ultimately, however, it was this vast scope that became its undoing. Each Cosm supplement introduced new rules, many of which tended to conflict with rules presented elsewhere. A real issue for a game that was supposed to be a universal system, and quality control wasn't at its best either. West End Games wrapped up the Torg storyline and ended its production run of the game in 1995 with War's End. Several resurrections of the game have been attempted, including one as recent as 2006, but unfortunately have failed to capture widespread appeal. Number 6. Paranoia. Never has dystopia been this much fun. First published in 1984, Paranoia takes place in a science fiction setting called Alpha Complex, and run by an all-knowing artificial intelligence called the computer. The computer is perfect, and the society the computer is tasked to oversee is also perfect. The penalty for challenging these assumptions of perfection is traitorous, and the penalty is, of course, death. Players take on the role of troubleshooters for the computer and are tasked with rooting out traitors and eliminating threats to the computer's control. Characters have 6 clones, which come into play when a character is killed, something that is really not all that difficult to achieve in Paranoia, not only from the computer, but from your fellow players. Deaths are frequent, horrific in the way player characters are mangled, disemboweled, eviscerated, and obliterated, and they're frequently humorous. It doesn't take too many interactions before players realize that the computer is undeniably paranoid and insane, and it requires little provocation to be found guilty of treason and eliminated. Even professing knowledge of the game's rules can have negative effects on the character's continued existence. Complicating things even more is the fact that there are genuine challenges to the computer's insane rule in the form of secret societies, such as the Illuminati, the SEALs, the Knights of the Circular Object, the Trekkies, and First Church of Christ Computer Programmer. Membership in any secret organization is, of course, treason. The most dreaded of all secret societies are the horrible communists, at least according to the computer, a society that doesn't actually exist, which is just bad news for troubleshooters who are frequently assigned to eliminate the communist threat. Denying that the communists exist is tantamount to calling the computer a liar. And of course, calling the computer a liar is treason, and the penalty for treason is death. To complicate matters even more is that secret societies frequently employ double agents and spies in each other's organizations, which tends to be hilarious when one actually runs into a communist cell, which actually doesn't really exist, as all the members are double agents from other secret societies. There have been many editions of this game, and there have been many additions to this game, and in the newer editions, the lightheartedness has been toned down for a darker, more serious, long-running campaign. Either way, Paranoia is a classic retro game, and well worth checking out. Number 5. Shadowrun. Released in 1989 by FASA, the same folks who brought you BattleTech, this cyberpunk RPG set the standard for excitement and creativities in role-playing games. Set in the near future of 2050, our world has been transformed by the end of the Mesoamerican long calendar and the reintroduction of magic. Humans transform or are born as elves, dwarves, goblins, and trolls. Magic actually works, and Earth becomes a peculiar amalgam of Dungeons and Dragons and cyberpunk. The transformation sends the world plunging into chaos, collapsing most governments and ushering in the rise of megacorporations that control vast armies and territory. Technological advances continue, however, especially in the area of cybernetics. The computer crash of 2029 led to the creation of the Matrix, a worldwide computer network that users interact with via direct neural interface. When conflicts arise, corporations, governments, organized crime syndicates, and even wealthy individuals subcontract their dirty work to specialists who then perform Shadowruns or missions undertaken by deniable assets without identities or those that wish to remain unknown. The most skilled of these specialists are called Shadowrunners, having earned a reputation for getting the job done. They have developed a knack for staying alive and prospering in the world of Shadowrun. The game is entirely skill-based and relies on six-sided dice and the achievement of successes, with players rolling a number of dice equal to their level in a skill. The more dice you roll, the better your chances of success. FASA closed its doors for good in 2001, but Shadowrun is still in print and in its 5th edition by Catalyst Games. Definitely worth checking out. Number 4, Star Wars from West End Games. First published in 1987, fully 4 years after the release of the final Star Wars movie Return of the Jedi, this RPG was what fans of the series had been waiting for, and the first licensed product from the Star Wars universe. Even if you don't play the game, the sourcebooks themselves became an integral part of the Star Wars expanded universe. Lucasfilm considered the West End Games Star Wars sourcebooks so authoritative that when Timothy Zahn was hired to write what became the Thrawn trilogy, he was sent a box of West End Games Star Wars books and directed to base his novel on the background material presented therein. Based on the West End Games D6 system, the game was expansively supported with sourcebooks, modules, and even a comprehensive miniatures line. There was a second edition of the game released in 1992, and a revised and expanded edition released in 1996. All told, by the end of its print run, there were over 140 sourcebooks, adventures, modules, and supplements for the game, and the RPG had made an indelible mark on the lore and history of the Star Wars universe that still survives to this day. Number 3, Gamma World. First released in 1978, this early science fiction role-playing game from TSR, a derivative work based on the earlier Metamorphosis Alpha, takes place on a post-apocalyptic Earth devastated by nuclear war. Radiation affects much of the planet, and civilization lies in ruins. The survivors struggle in a hostile landscape with medieval-level technology and populated with mutated monsters. In many respects, Gamma World is analogous to Dungeons & Dragons, but in a science fiction setting. Players take on the role of pure-strain humans, mutated animals, or even mutated plants. The early editions of the game had random charts to determine what powers mutants had, which frequently resulted in some bizarre and crazy combinations. But this was considered one of the biggest appeals of the game. Another fun feature was the discovery of ancient artifacts, which usually meant technology. Since the characters frequently had no knowledge of such things, Gamma World included complex flowcharts to determine if they could figure out just how the item worked, or if they accidentally obliterated themselves and or the party. In general, Gamma World was originally a science fiction dungeon crawl, but the dungeons were actually old spaceports or other ruined complexes that might include malfunctioning robot guards and inhabited by strange mutant creatures. Either way, it was a lot of fun. Number 2, Call of Cthulhu. This game definitely makes it high on the list. Introducing a whole new generation to the horror works of H.P. Lovecraft, this was the first role-playing game to generally introduce scares to the tabletop, immersing PCs in a world where not only could they hardly hope to kill the monsters they faced, but that these monsters were so incomprehensibly powerful that they could inadvertently cause the extinction of the human race, and whose knowledge of such could literally drive a character insane. Derivative of the Dungeons & Dragons system, though there are no classes or leveling, Call of Cthulhu uses polyhedral dice and a percentile system for skill checks and is quite robust. Characters last as long as they can survive and improve on their skills by using them, but they don't gain hit points and become harder to kill. They are ordinary people who make horrific discoveries and ultimately meet horrific ends at the hands of the bizarre things they encounter or end up permanently insane in some asylum. First introduced in 1981 by Chaosium Publishing, the game's original setting took place in the 1920s, which mirrors the time period of many of Lovecraft's stories, though later expansions would allow for stories to take place in the 1890s, modern day, and even the 23rd century. The default campaign setting for the game is Lovecraft Country, and it is revealed in amazing detail in a series of supplements for Lovecraft's fictional towns of Arkham, Massachusetts, Innsmouth, Kingsport, and Dunwich, which is the setting for many of Lovecraft's most famous Cthulhu Mythos stories. Call of Cthulhu is notable for the way it truly changed the format of tabletop role-playing games and took players out of the dungeons and into complex, layered storylines that would begin seemingly innocently enough, a kidnapping or a mysterious disappearance, a robbery that would ultimately lead the investigators to make horrific discoveries, world-shattering knowledge that they would rather avoid than confront directly. And when they did confront them, the best course of action was frequently to run away. Next to Dungeons & Dragons, Call of Cthulhu is one of the few original role-playing games to remain continually in print since its introduction and is now in its 7th edition, and in 2011 celebrated 30 years of publication. Okay, before I reveal my number one pick, here are a few RPGs that didn't make the list but are indeed notable. Alright, here we go. The number one retro RPG of all time is Dungeons & Dragons. Of course, D&D is the number one retro RPG. Did you really expect anything else? The granddaddy of all role-playing games since its introduction in 1974 with the original box set, Dungeons & Dragons was the first tabletop role-playing game, and its worldwide influence on modern-day pop culture is undeniable. The product of a collaboration between gamers Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, and spawning from their retrospective war game clubs, the Castle and Crusade Society and Twin Cities, Dungeons & Dragons takes place in a medieval-style fantasy world, supplemented by magic and fantastic creatures from myth, legend, and fiction. Dungeons & Dragons would go on to inspire many of today's most popular fantasy authors and modern computer role-playing games, and many other aspects as well. The idea of assuming another persona, using dice or random number generation on character statistics to resolve tasks, where the entertainment wasn't something that was handed to you like a novel or a movie, but actually created by the user, takes its cues from Dungeons & Dragons. Even if you've never picked up a D20, D&D's influence on modern culture is pervasive in both obvious and subtle ways. From the myriad number of TV shows and movies to a whole generation of geeks who were inspired by the game. One would be hard-pressed to stroll through the ranks of the movers and shakers of Silicon Valley and not find someone who, at some point, picked up a D20 and was inspired by the game that followed. For these reasons and many others, Dungeons & Dragons is without a doubt the number one retro RPG. Well, folks, that about wraps up my very first top 10 list. I hope you had a lot of fun with it. I know I did. What are your favorite retro RPGs? Do you disagree with my list? Well, then please comment below and feel free to check out my channel for other retro RPG reviews. Subscribe to this channel to get the latest updates. And as always, my friends, may your D20 roll true and game on.